And welcome everybody to this VR Learning Hub event. Today we're talking to Thijs de Vries. He's the CEO of WarpVR. WarpVR is a software platform specialized in building and deploying interactive 360 video. And I've met with Thijs on several occasions. We live in the same city actually, so we don't see each other that often actually, considering. And so the VR Learning Hub members, they all want to experiment with virtual reality for their teaching and training. And many of them want to create their own learning material. And we've seen in previous sessions that you can actually get quite far with 360 photos, especially if you want to present knowledge or information in a context-rich situation. But in other situations, 360 video is a better solution. And what you often see then is whenever people experience 360 video, that they always sort of almost expect some sort of interactivity. In a way, where we're very used with our screens to just watch videos and not participate in them other than as a viewer. In VR, it's a bit different, and many people expect a certain type of interactivity. And there are different ways of creating this interactive 360 videos, and I think WarpVR is a really interesting solution for that. We have done a few projects with it ourselves in the past, and yeah, I really like their whole user experience. So today we're going to have a session of about an hour, I think. We're with a small group, but we're also putting this online on YouTube somewhere. Let's see. And first I'm going to give I'm going to allow Thijs to present the WarpVR and what they do, what kind of clients they work for, and how the software, what the software can do for you. And feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Then I can see whether I can interrupt Thijs or include them in the Q&A at the end of the session. Okay, without further ado, Thijs, please enlighten us.
All right, thank you so much, Robin. Yeah, first of all, great to be part of this webinar, to explain a little bit about what we do and to give kind of our vision indeed on the use of VR for learning, and indeed with 360 video kind of at the center of that. Let me quickly introduce myself a little bit and also the business, and then explain a little bit about what we do. Excuse me, so a movie just started playing. So to begin with myself, Thijs de Vries, I've studied interaction design in Delft at the Delft Technical University. And I did a master in design for interaction, and I was always very curious about kind of how to design these interactions with kind of emotion in mind. And actually, when I started working, I've always worked as an entrepreneur, and when I started working, I found out that using games or gaming technology was very interesting in order to help clients kind of with their employees and how to motivate their employees, or how to learn them something, or how to change behavior. And I felt that through these gaming principles, you could teach employees, but also kind of customers eventually a lot of things, and keep them engaged for a long time. And actually, during that period, I came across, more into kind of the training and learning and development of different organizations, and also felt there that the use of gaming within learning and development is actually very helpful and very interesting. So in 2000, I would believe it's 16, I started this company with two other co-founders. where we were, seeing the kind of technology of VR coming up. So it was really early days of VR. In some sense, it still is. But even back then, the headsets were a little bit different. So currently, you have these kind of headsets. This the Oculus Go. Back in 2016, there wasn't kind of a standalone mobile VR headset. But I felt like this technology in combination with gaming is very suitable for learning. It's very interesting for some clients, when it comes to kind of learning and development for their own employees. So that's actually what we did. So currently we are working for mainly larger organizations, although that's not completely true, since we also have some kind of education organizations within our client base. But for instance, we work for KLM, and then it's more kind of a technical, hard skills type of training they develop. But it can also be training scenarios which are more in the field of soft skills, so which are more about emotion, storytelling, about dealing, about giving feedback, etc. So I'll get back to that a little bit later. I just came across a few slides which I will share, which will probably help in kind of explaining a little bit better what we do. So let me start with that, and really feel free to drop any questions in the chat, so we can answer them even during the slides or at any moment. So I think you can see my screen. Is it correct? Probably. Yeah. So we have a few slides here. So actually, when we are talking to companies about training and about learning and development, we come across kind of the different kind of wishes, so to say, these companies have. So on one hand, it's really about engagement. So what we see a lot is that companies who have been implementing e-learning, for instance, often get comments from their employees that it kind of lacks in a certain way of engagement. So it kind of feels as a click-through exercise and doesn't really feel as a proper kind of realistic training solution. So that realism is one of the other wishes. So on the job training, for instance, it's kind of what we're seeing is maybe most realistic way of training. But it's a way that would cost you a lot of time, and you would require the operation itself to be able to train these people. So on the job is interesting, situational, is interesting, but it should not disturb the operation. Size is important. We want to train large groups of employees, for instance, when it comes to larger organizations. But we do want to have that feel kind of training in smaller groups. So everybody gets the right amount of attention and gets, kind of the feeling that it's kind of appropriate training, learning content for that specific individual. So there are kind of some wishes, and kind of if you're looking at the different ways of training, there's currently kind of in the market or what's being used by these organizations. It differs from e-learning, which is probably the last one that entered the learning and development space, but there's a lot of classroom training. There's, of course, instructor-led, lots of use of kind of PowerPoint, and there's the on-the-job kind of as the, real-life experience form of training. But actually what you're seeing is that although in these different forms of training, there are really positive sides to it, there is also kind of a critical note to make. For instance, the e-learnings, what I just said, they're not that engaging often. Doesn't really feel realistic. It's hard to put that learning you've got through an e-learning into practice. Things like classroom, instructor-led, also the on-the-job, they're very time intensive. It has to take place at a certain moment, which requires quite a bit of time and therefore, of course, also money. And they're often very theoretical focused. So it kind of lacks on kind of the way how things are really going into practice, which is always a bit different than what you're learning in theory. So the ideal way of learning and training is what we found, and what we're getting back from our clients is that it's a realistic way of training, so that it's as close as possible to the reality, but it doesn't disturb that operation, and it can take place anytime, but also anywhere. So that's what we're eventually doing at WarpVR. We use virtual reality in order to get more engaged, but also better prepared employees. So through the learning scenarios employees are actually doing through our software, they're actually better prepared employees. So in any situation they could come across, they know what to do because they've been in that situation before, but then in virtual reality. So therefore, we revolutionize the way companies train. And the way we actually do that is by offering a platform. And it's a platform where organizations can kind of easily create these VR training scenarios themselves. And it's being done in a 3-step process. First step would be the fact that organizations can create these trainings in combination with 360 video. I will show you an example later on. But also in kind of a second step, make sure that the learning content is being distributed to the right employees. So it can either be done through our software, or we have several LMS integrations, for example. And the data eventually is very interesting. So what choices did employees make in these VR training scenarios? How well did they do? Maybe eventually what kind of score did they get? Which can give you conclusions about specific individuals. Maybe you need to talk to a specific employee after he's done a safety training and he didn't do well. But just to ask, what went wrong? Why did you make this choice, etc. But it's also very interesting data what we've came across regarding kind of the procedures that are being trained more in general. So, for example, kind of a evacuation scenario in terms, which everybody should know whenever a fire occurs, would give you the data of how people would actually exit the building, for instance, when the fire alarm goes off. So normally, of course, when you train this, the fire alarm goes off, everybody follows each other, you're going to wait outside and eventually you go back in. But by using virtual reality for training, you can actually practice this multiple times. But it's also kind of an individual approach. So for every specific individual, are they taking the right emergency exit, for instance? And if they don't, maybe you need to talk to these individuals who are not doing it right. But you could also say maybe you should change procedures because on the basis of that data, it's better to kind of direct people a different way. So it could be anything.
First question already, Thijs. So I've been chatting with Melinda and Elizabeth, and they are quite new to the field. So earlier you showed me a video you have, perhaps that gives them some extra context in what exactly it is that you're doing.
Definitely. Yes, I do.
A bit less abstract.
Yes, definitely. So let me show you that video. So I'll stop sharing this one. So that is this video. Okay, you can still hear me while I'm sharing this screen. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Just to give a brief introduction on this video. So this is the video you're gonna see explains a little bit about one of the training scenarios an organization made on our platform. This specific training scenario is about a job interview. So how can you prepare to do kind of the best you can do for a job interview, and how can you use virtual reality to be able to do it? So in the video, you will gonna see kind of parts of the training scenario this organization made. So just to give you a kind of a clear idea on how this looks. So the video is, of course, just traditional flat video, but eventually, like if you wear kind of a headset, just as this one, you can, of course, really look around, see, what is going on, and actually interact with that scenario.
How VR will help you be prepared for your next job interview.
Hey, it's good. I see you. I saw a vacancy on the job site, and I immediately thought of you.
Some moments stay with us forever. Your first job interview is one of those moments. Am I prepared?
We just discussed why you would like to take this position. But now, can you tell me something about why you think you are suitable for it? Can you tell me something about your talents?
Do they like me? Will I say what they want to hear? Preparing for such an event is difficult. Even research shows that 96% of all people have some form of anxiety around job interviews. In this VR training scenario, you are looking for a new job. You are placed in a very realistic job interview. By playing this VR scenario, you learn what to say, what to do, and how to act. Try over and over again to be even better prepared and to ask better questions. After all, more experience will lead to more confidence. Be prepared, learn differently.
So hopefully that explains a little bit better about one of the, so this is kind of an example of one of the training scenarios that is being made on the platform. Maybe it's also good to take that step to that platform in order to show you a little bit how this works and how companies are actually creating these training scenarios. So you can see here. So actually, as already mentioned before, the platform really consists of 3 parts. So organizations get an account. From that point on, they're being able to create training scenarios. In the second step, they're being able to kind of distribute this to the right people. And in the third step, to kind of analyze that data. And let me give you an example. So what you can see here is some different training scenarios. So one of them, this is a different one than you just saw in the movie. But this is, for instance, a training scenario around customer service in a telecom store. Bit of a different topic, but it's really about soft skills. And a client walks in a retail store. How do you cope with the questions she has in this case? And this is kind of how training scenarios are being built up. So what you're seeing here is a flow diagram with one starting point here completely at the left, and there are multiple endpoints here on the right. And what you should kind of see is that every one of these blocks is actually a little portion of a video, but then a 360 video. So a 360 video, which is kind of all around you once you put on the VR headset. So all these small pieces of video are linked to each other, and at certain points, so let me zoom in a little bit to show you a little bit better. So in this case, for instance, there is a scene. In this case, it's called a customer approaches. There's only one choice, so you go to the next scene. But at certain scenes, there is choices to be made. So in this case, there's a choice about approaching the customer. So you can choose A or B. So this is stuff you can all build up yourself, which you can easily do in our tool by adding new scenes, multiple choice scenes, direction scenes, hotspots, etc. So the importance here is to kind of build up that training scenario. And that's where we help our clients with as well. So eventually, like if you build this completely from A to, from the beginning until the end, you could, end up with something like this. So this is kind of a smaller scenario, roughly about 20 scenes with different endings. And each time kind of an employee actually plays this training scenario, they could end up in a different ending. And one ending could be the best one, eventually in this case, specific case about the customer in a retail store. This is actually about a complaint a customer has, and you have to respond on that complaint correctly. So she goes out of the retail store in a very happy way. So you helped her in the correct way. The other possible ending is where she's not happy and you didn't help her in the correct way. So this is something you can build up completely yourself. And what we're seeing is that actually companies are creating, on one hand, really more kind of technical training scenarios, and on the other hand, are creating more, soft skills related training scenarios. If we dive into this scenario just a little bit further, just to kind of explain where the video actually is. So this is kind of a screen which gives a little bit more detail about a specific scene. And what you can see here is a portion of video, which is actually a 360 video. So it's presented here in a flat way, but eventually this, if you put on a VR headset, this will be completely all around you. And in these videos, there are these question boxes, which you can create yourself. You can drag them around and just place them anywhere. And each of these answers will get you to a different scene where you probably recorded kind of a different reaction of this woman.
Yeah. So to be clear, your software is not meant for the editing process, right? For every clip, you don't do a lot of editing in 360 video, especially in these interactive ones. But your platform is not for the editing that you do that in Adobe Premiere or whatever, or in Final Cut. But this is really for the interactive layer and the distribution to all the devices, right?
Yeah, that's completely correct. So what you're indeed doing here is just, you're creating the scenario. So building that scenario is always a two-step process. First one being writing the storyline, making sure the learning goals are in there, making sure you're asking the right questions. If you've done that correctly, you can create actually an export, which you can print and take to the film set. Then you start filming. But the actual, indeed, kind of editing of that film, there's software available to do that. And even currently, there's a lot of choice in 360 cameras, which are on the market right now, from high-end ones, but also to consumer cameras, for instance, from GoPro, which have editing software with the camera you purchase.
Yeah.
So it's fairly easy to use.
So cameras are getting better, and the software is getting easier to produce 360 video content. Are we already at a stage where you can advise clients to do their own 360 recordings, or do you usually still advise to use specialists for this?
Yeah, we do both actually, and if you're looking actually at traditional video, both are happening as well. So with a smartphone these days, everybody can create videos.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you want to have a high quality, very professional video, because a specific learning scenario should kind of have that professional feel. Yeah. Yes, you should hire professionals, but both is definitely possible. So we have clients, also bigger ones, who are completely creating their own training scenarios with kind of consumer cameras, so to say, with a GoPro, for instance, which are very, very easy to use nowadays. But those same clients also say, okay, some of these training scenarios we want to give to our employees. We're going to hire kind of a video production company in order to do it for us. So we see both.
And the hardest parts there are also in the soft skills, probably, right? It's the acting that's the 360 video depends quite heavily on acting. All these social skills training that it depends on acting, and the whole script writing and creating interactive scripts can be quite a challenge. So it might not be specifically in the technical challenge, but you might need specifically professional help with that part. What do you think?
Yeah, that is kind of correct. So and that's at some level it's the same with providing or creating other kind of training and learning materials also within e-learning. Like eventually the technology becomes so well developed that it's very easy to use. So kind of the hard part is creating kind of the right content for the right technology. And in this case, VR is a very interesting technology, but it also requires kind of a certain mindset in order to create the best training scenarios. So that's kind of the hardest part probably in order to get right. So what we always do with our clients is that we help on creating, let's say, the first 2, 3, 4 training scenarios. And very often what we see after that is that they get the hang of it. They understand the kind of mindset, they understand kind of the possibilities of using 360 video, and also how to kind of use indeed actors, for instance, or specific camera locations. And still very often they say, okay, the next 20 training scenarios, I'm still going to hire kind of that video production crew in order to do the filming for me. But I know my company procedures, so I've got the tools right now to create these training scenarios completely myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to kind of finish the platform itself, in order to, so the second step of that process is, after you have these training scenarios, is to get them to your people, to get them with the right employees. So we've got a distribution network in here, but we also work with kind of LMS solutions which are out there. So we integrate with most of them, and eventually, if you're looking at, so this is, for instance, a list with people who have actually access to these different type of trainings. And here I have somebody who played a customer service training. So just an example of somebody who did a training, did that in 1 minute and 16 seconds, which is very fast, considering doing a training course in VR. But in this case, it's a small scenario, got 5 stars to do it. It was actually his high score. And you can actually see here specifically for the scenes he was in, which answers he gave and how much time it took for him to do it. And you can also see this for all these different types of training scenarios. So this is a Dutch one, a bit of a longer one. Here you can see there is a -2 here. So you see that, took a kind of a wrong turn there, or at least gave the wrong answer. So this data will give you that specific insight in how well people are doing, but also how well kind of these training procedures are being followed. And based upon that data, you can, of course, either re-educate staff, whenever that's required, or maybe build new training scenarios in order to explain certain specific topics within the moments in those scenarios where things went wrong. So there's a lot of flexibility there. Just to get back to those slides, here we are. So eventually, what I just showed you was really the tool set we use in order to create and distribute and analyze those training scenarios. The other, of course, major part is the actual playing of the training scenarios. So therefore, we support a couple of different VR headsets. So the Oculus Quest is here on the image. This is the Oculus Go. We also support different brands, but we also support playing on mobile and tablet, for instance. So what we think is very important is that we deliver tools to clients in order to easily be immersed in these training scenarios. So we also say, okay, you can actually play on your smartphone. Trainees sign in, they can see the training scenarios they are allowed to play, and they can actually play them, but also decide to kind of stop playing on smartphone and continue playing on a VR headset. So kind of we offer that flexibility there. So if you're actually looking at the solution we offer and the benefits it eventually has for organizations, it's first of all really a flexible way of training. So as already mentioned, it's scalable, because also we offer those mobile and tablet solutions. Employees can actually train anytime, anywhere. Very different approach than some of the other forms of training. So also the evacuation training, for instance, with an evacuation training in VR, you can actually train that evacuation anytime, anywhere. Even while you're not in the building, you can even train at home. While in other solutions, you can only train at that specific moment at that specific location. So it makes it a very flexible way of training. Of course, because of that reason, it will save you time and money. So there's less time spent on the actual training. So it's more an effective way of training, but also there's less operational disturbance. So the operation can continue while people are actually playing. And eventually, and that's of course kind of the major technological advantage of using VR and these 360 video surroundings, it's that it's very, very close to reality. And especially that's what video really can do, especially in combination with actors. It will not get any more realistic than the use of video. And what we are hearing back from clients and what we're seeing in the training scenarios that are being made is that actually emotion becomes part of a training. And very often in situations on the work floor, things can get very stressed, or people can get anxious, if they have to perform certain procedures they're not completely confident in doing. And that emotion you want to grasp as well. So if you can put that emotion into training, these situations you are training become very real. And once you've experienced those emotions, even in training, it will be way easier to perform those procedures in reality. So what we're seeing there is a high employee engagement, but also the retention, therefore, is bigger than with other forms of learning.
Yeah. So it's really also finding this isn't the solution for every learning problem, of course. So there are some things that just fit better, especially when there's emotional involvement helps a lot. What are your favorite projects you've seen in WarpVR? What are things that work really well?
Good question. I think there are actually two major topics we're seeing in the scenarios that are being created. So one is really regarding safety. So of course, emotion is a huge part in safety procedures. When things get really ugly, it can get very tense. So you still need to know what to do.
And it's very spatial as well. It really depends on you have to know what to do in a certain building.
Definitely, yeah. So currently, for instance, there is an organization who are creating these how would you call this in English, like BAV scenarios. So it's also regarding kind of emergency exits. And it's
on the work floor, yeah.
Indeed, and this specific organization has 50 different locations, so they are creating 50 different scenarios, because each one is slightly different.
Yeah.
And that's what these people need to know, who are working at these locations, specifically for that location, how to escape whenever something is going wrong.
Yeah.
So indeed, definitely true. But it's evacuation, but it's also things that, just procedures that can go wrong. Maybe the impact isn't that big, but still you want to perform these procedures in the correct way, and therefore you can train them, on forehand in VR. Yeah.
And these are also a part of the popularity of these safety trainings is probably also because the business case is really clear, right? These are trainings you have to do. Often it's obligated, and it's quite labor intensive usually, because you have to do physical training or the evacuation training. So the business that always helps us as well, of course.
Yeah, it's definitely. So on one hand, there's lots of training courses that need to be done. Indeed, so people are required to be able to do those, sometimes even by law. But it's also kind of the the organizations we help are organizations who also feel like, okay, the employees we have are our most important assets. The people are most important in the business, and we want to provide them with training material to be prepared when something might go wrong.
Yeah.
So they want to give them the best learning experiences in order to be the best prepared.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what we're seeing. So on one hand, it's really safety. On the other hand, the other major group would be soft skills. So it's of course a kind of a big category. But we're seeing a lot of training scenarios being developed around giving feedback about dealing with emotions, about tough clients, about giving somebody, about firing somebody, for instance, or telling them that they didn't do well on a certain assessment. So there are also all these kind of soft skills, more kind of on a management level sometimes, more leadership style scenarios, which can be trained very well with video in combination with actors very often, but also in order to incorporate those emotions within the soft skills, people need to learn.
Yeah, I see Trudy writing quite enthusiastically. that I know she's working on a soft skills training with her company. Could you perhaps it's all top secret still. Could you perhaps explain a bit, Trudy?
We have done. We're a very small training provider in the UK, and we have done soft skills training in the past, all classroom based. And the biggest problem is you can't scale it up in terms of time or cost. So this is why we're really interested to see how it can be developed in a much more contained way, shall we say. So we have seen a few examples of this. It comes down, I suppose, to the initial cost. I guess there's a lot of cost up front, and then the more people you train, the more economic it is per head.
Yes, definitely. So eventually there's some investment, you know, on forehand in order to really create those training scenarios. But it's so I think that's the beauty of this solution as well. The fact that you're using video makes that the time to market is actually very short, and therefore the investment isn't as big as kind of what you're seeing in VR training scenarios that are being developed more maybe with, you know, computer worlds, 3D animated content, so to say.
Yeah. And do you find that people are okay with wearing the headsets, particularly if they're using it with a smartphone? I mean, do you get any resistance from people?
What we're seeing is that the companies who are you know, kind of helping, so it needs to be kind of embedded within the organization, right? So you can't just say, here are 10 headsets, good luck. So you need kind of an embedded program. And we're seeing if that's done, you know, right, people are definitely willing to wear the VR headset and actually to be trained that way. And very often, there's a bit of a threshold in the beginning, like people are a bit anxious, you know, once you wear the VR headset, kind of the world around you disappears because you're in that virtual world, right? So that can be a little bit scary in the beginning. But each and every time people are taking off the VR headset and you would ask them, you know, how long do you think you've been in VR? They will always say like 3 or 4 times longer than they've actually been in VR. So it feels as a long experience while they've been in there only for 5 minutes, for instance. So it means that they're directly immersed. They are directly, within seconds, they are in that new environment, and they completely forgot the fact kind of that they're wearing a VR headset, and maybe that it's kind of a bit scary in the beginning to do. So it's also easy to overcome. That's also what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of on the base of the VR headsets. The other part is the universal headsets. So you've mentioned those as well. We don't see too many people playing with those actually, and it's really because the experience is less, of course, than, you know, with these, you know, type of devices, and very often it doesn't give you the best kind of image because things might get a little bit blurred or they don't really fit properly. So that's actually why we've made kind of the mobile app also to be used without a VR headset. And very often actually and this is more the case actually for the soft skills type scenarios than for the safety ones, being able to not constantly kind of look around and see what's happening all around you isn't a big deal. Because in soft skills training, very often the interaction only happens in front of you. But even then, the fact that you are being able to look around, you know, to kind of hold your smartphone and still kind of look around, does give you that immersive feel. It's not as immersive as a VR headset, that's for sure. But still, it feels like you are part of that training scenario. And that is truly different than with traditional video, where you know, okay, it's being framed. I'm looking at where the director of the video wants me to look at. And in this case, you can decide yourself. So that's really what we're seeing, is that people are directly feeling like if the scenario is of a high quality and properly built, that people directly feel, hey, I am part of this scenario. I'm actually the main character in this scenario, and I can decide the outcome of this story. And once you have that feeling as an employee, as a trainee, you're in there, you know, you're immersed, and you want to make sure, you know, the scenario gets to, you know, the proper ending.
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought of that. So just so make sure I've got this right. So you're saying that they're actually just holding their phones rather than having it within the headset?
True. Correct.
Yeah.
But I think whenever. So you're working from a training company. So when people come to you, you expect some involvement. They are already. I would always ask them to wear a VR headset, and I would always advise you to invest in standalone headsets, because and you can actually get a proper if you have proper VR glasses and a good smartphone, it can work pretty well. But you're really dependent on somebody else's phone, and there are many awful VR headsets out there. So it's just much more controlled when you have your own dedicated headsets, and they give you a sort of consistent, decent experience.
Definitely.
Yeah. And your question on whether people have any hesitation to put them on, it's always you always have this, especially when people have never worn a headset, or perhaps one time during a festival or something. And of course there's hesitation, and people are making pictures of each other, and they're laughing, and you probably also have to consider that the first time they wear headsets, they will probably not learn as much as you want in their training session, because a lot of their cognitive effort goes to just having a VR headset on and being somewhere else. And that's just really something to get adjusted to. But you get used to it, and after 2 or 3 sessions, at least the first laughs are out of their systems. And
I also see that changes already. I mean, it's really different now than 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So eventually, many people have tried VR before. They know what it is. Maybe they have a headset at home, or at least the company already did something, maybe a bit experimental, but with VR before. So the first encounter with VR, we don't see many people currently that have never have had any VR experience. So that really differs, and it will continue to go in that direction, where more and more people have had that experience before.
For us, it might be worth though having something in our sort of pre-course joining instructions, just so that if we do have people that are completely new to it,
Definitely.
we can deal with them first. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things we do eventually is also make sure that trainees are properly onboarded on the training scenario. So we have a tutorial in there, which you can view when you're a first-time user, to just explain how the headset works. That you can look around, how you select things, and it's kind of more of a generic kind of tutorial, but which of course can be used for every topic training scenario. And I think that's kind of the advantage of the fact that we are kind of building that platform, so we can make sure that the way that these VR trainings are being used is done in the most easy way possible. And often this playing on a smartphone can be the step up also to a proper kind of VR headset experience. So it's not about choosing, it's about making the choice specifically for a specific group in a certain situation. And very often we have clients, we actually have clients who are training 15,000 people staff by mobile phone, but they still have about 20 VR headsets on the main office. So they build kind of a VR room. Yeah. So people can actually make that choice. So they can go into the VR room, pick up a headset and play there, or even borrow a headset, take it home, or play on their smartphones. So it's also kind of on a situation basis, whatever the best option is for a company.
Thijs, do you still have some slides you want to show us, or shall we're sort of moving on into to asking questions and discussing, right?
I think
there's still something you really want to show us?
No. So it's good to go into the to answer more questions if they're there.
Yeah. Okay. So we're with a small group, so we haven't really received a lot of questions yet, but I do have a few. Perhaps you can stop sharing your screen.
I'm actually trying here. Yep.
Yes. Okay. And let me see. Yes. Okay. So. One question we already sort of touched upon. So you showed that it's quite an easy user experience to form this interactive script with the flow diagram, and it looks lovely. But it can also be quite a challenge, right? Because writing a script can be quite difficult because you're telling a story and you want to have things that are exactly right. But writing an interactive story and thinking about all the different choices and where they lead to, and also empathizing for the situation. Okay, so you're building the soft skills training where you train your staff in dealing with tough clients, and you also have to think, if I say this and this, how would the client respond? So it's how difficult is it in your experience?
Yeah, it can be difficult to get started. So definitely, kind of the first time you're indeed writing a script, maybe, but definitely writing an interactive script can be quite challenging. So what we are doing most of the time is actually that we're guiding clients in order to do this kind of the first, 2, 3, or 4 times when they're writing these interactive training scenarios. And very often what we're seeing is that after that, people understand kind of the philosophy of writing these interactive scripts, how to do it, where to start, but also kind of how to go on from there, and how to make most use of the 360 video environment and the fact that it's a interactive script for VR.
Yeah.
So either way, we do that kind of on a workshop basis, or we have our own what we call Warp Academy. We have 2 courses with all kinds of video material about how to build proper training scenarios. And what we're actually seeing is that if you're doing this a couple of times, it is not as challenging as you think. It's just a mindset, but getting that mindset might be a little bit tricky. So very often, just to give you an example, when we work with clients, for instance, kind of a safety training scenario, we are sitting together with them to create that training scenario. And let's say it's about safety on the work floor or in a kind of a chemical plant. So one of the instructional designers would say, hey, can we do kind of a shot where you would get a question with something like, please select what is unsafe in the situation. That's a question that might pop up in the training scenario.
Yeah.
So whenever we get that as an example, we always tell these clients that those type of questions, so we kind of call them e-learning, style questions. But those type of questions already give a lot away, because maybe in the real situation, if you want to mimic reality, you want to get as close to reality as possible, you would never get a question like that. I mean, there would be nobody, if you're just doing your job and you would walk around that, factory, nobody would ask you that specific question. Not in a regular workday. So what we're always trying to do, and that's where VR is really good at, is to get close to reality. And you can get close to reality by mimicking kind of maybe a normal day at the office or a normal day at the factory. And you do that actually by telling stories. So we're sitting with the client and then we're going to think, okay, what is a story? What is a procedure that is being done, which can happen, but where something goes wrong. And in that case, for instance, we are creating a training scenario which is about a client which needs to have something delivered to them, but there is a pump, for instance, which is not working and you have to fix it. There's time pressure. but you cannot just fix the pump because something else is broken as well. And then the question becomes, okay, you're going to fix the pump, you're in VR and you're doing that, and your boss tells you in the beginning of the scenario, hey, there's time pressure, we need to have this fixed today. And so you're kind of, anxious to get it fixed. And then at a certain point, there is an unsafe situation. But then it's the question, do you see that unsafe situation, or are you going to do your normal job? And if you just do your normal job and you're going to fix the pump, then something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good thing that something goes wrong, because only then people realize, hey, wait a minute, I need to be aware of these unsafe situations.
Yeah.
Then again, it's far more likely that they're aware of these unsafe situations when they're actually doing their job in reality.
Yeah.
So that's where we're trying to get these clients.
The sort of search assignment, that's actually a thing that works pretty well in VR. It really it supports you looking around for things, and it really matters on where your gaze is directed. But what you disliked about these questions is that it's really close-ended, and you want it way more open-ended and notice things when you don't even mention that something unsafe might happen.
Yeah, the difference is more that the one type of question is about a context.
Okay.
So you're not really in the scenario, because you're kind of looking from a distance, so to say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
To answer the question, what is unsafe, and the other type of questions are in the context. So in order to be really immersed and to make the best use of VR, and definitely the 360 video, it would be good to have a scenario in which you feel you're being part of it. Where you're in that specific scenario, and therefore being very close to reality. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing that works really well.
And a somewhat related question, I think, is, so the challenge is one of the challenges is writing good questions with choices, and carefully think about the choices your audience has, your viewer has. And I can also, I would expect that many people have the tendency to clearly make you have three options and one is the right one and the other ones are definitely not the right ones. Is that a good approach, or should you make it?
Well, like if you start building these training scenarios, very often you build the right path, so to say, first. So what is the right procedure? What is the correct way of handling or communicating, or whatever you need to do in that specific scenario? So if you do the good path, you get from beginning to end. And the next step would be to look at specific moments where employees very often go a different direction, or make mistakes, or do something else. And then you're gonna make kind of side paths there. So that's kind of the most easy way to set up these training scenarios. Yeah. The last challenge there, of course, is how do I make sure that the answer and the questions are formulated in the correct way, so you don't give away directly the right answer. Yeah. Very often you can have a specific question and you read the three answers. And you're like, okay, these two cannot be correct, so it's the other one. So you kind of want to avoid that, but this is kind of the last kind of details of creating that scenario, making it really good. And it can be, and this is of course the case in many different training, methods, also in e-learnings or in classrooms or whatever. So it's always important to get that, formulation of the question and the answers correctly.
Do you see trainings developed on your platform which don't have clear right answers?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So for instance, actually the flow I showed you is for a customer service training. So this is specifically it's done for British Telecom, and there is a customer walking into the store, and when she walks into the store, so this is also being done by an actor. You can see that she is a little bit upset, so she plays this very well. So you can see that something is wrong.
Yeah.
And then the question is, how do you approach her? are you just going to say, hello, how are you, good day, and you don't mention anything about the fact that she's a bit upset? Or are you going to mention it? So those are the two options you actually have. And, you know, in my opinion, if I read these two answers, I think they're different, but they're also quite similar in a certain way. So for me, it would be difficult to answer.
Yeah.
And there's also kind of company culture in here as well. Like, is British Telecom a company who's gonna be really kind of informal, and make sure that you are gonna mention the fact that she has a certain emotion, or are you being really formal maybe, and are you almost neglecting the fact that she's upset? So you can bring these kind of elements also into that training scenario, which I think is very interesting.
Okay, so Trudy has some questions on pricing. Let's go into that after this. I had one last question about so you clients, or you work with this network of WarpVR experts. We're actually one of them, and so they produce a lot of content on the platform. So all together, you receive a lot of. You have a lot of potential clients who have a problem, a learning challenge, and they want to create a training for that, a VR training for that. And so your platform really focuses on creating interactive 360 video, but that's only one form of VR. And a completely different form is, of course, when you create a computer-generated world, a 3D world, which in interactivity, just where you have infinite possibilities in interactivity. And here you're always limited to somewhat like of a tree structure. How often do companies come to you with a learning problem where you actually end up, okay, it might be better for you to actually build a 3D gaming world?
Maybe not even that often, but there is definitely a clear distinction. So there are definitely training topics where you should not be using our platform. So the 3D kind of indeed infinite options, computerized worlds, they're very interesting, of course. And we can see them being used a lot for kind of more muscle memory type of training scenarios. So really procedures you have to perform where okay, this specific button on this machine is here, then I have to walk to this side and I have to do something here. So where you need your hands as well in order to perform those. Probably best to use 3D interactive with controllers and more make use of those worlds. So the side where we are on is way more about storytelling and about emotion. So and more about bringing people very close to reality. So there's definitely a difference there. There's also a difference in terms of the time and effort needed to create the content, and therefore how fast you can get the content to your employees.
Yeah, so that's changing a bit as well, of course, if you look over the period of years. So you now see the 3D scanning becomes sort of consumer friendly, and that if I hear the challenge one of your clients had, that they had 50 scenarios for all different training locations, and yeah, it will become easier and easier to create 3D worlds with built-in characters who you can instruct to do all sorts of human-like behavior.
Yeah.
Is that going to affect your company, do you think?
Well,
finish up with a.
No, it won't. No, of course. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting developments going on. I mean, VR. You can see in the last couple of years, there's a tremendous growth in companies who are doing something with VR and learning and training. So there's a lot being done there. So for us, it's also important to kind of realize, what are we good at, and how are we going to do this? And definitely there are many, very interesting solutions out there as well who are taking a bit of a different approach and work for kind of a different way of training. So that's definitely what we're seeing. So eventually, you know, one of the things we definitely believe in and what we do is the fact that the way that we are approaching this technology and this way of training is very suitable for a type of training, but always embedded in kind of a complete training program. So it's not going to happen that there's a organization who are saying, okay, every single training we have, we're going to do with WarpVR, because that's not going to happen. So we make sure that we integrate with their learning management systems, so that, you know, employees can easily say, okay, now I'm going to do this e-learning. Okay, I finished it. Now I'm going to click on the VR training, and then they start the VR training.
Yeah.
And then they get back to the e-learning or to the classroom training, or there's an on-the-job part in that training.
Yeah.
So it's eventually it's kind of a blended approach. So I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, we didn't really cover that, but that's really a very interesting progress you're making over there. This whole integration into existing e-learning, into existing LMS systems. Yeah, could you perhaps tell us a bit about the pricing?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so in kind of the model that we have is that we we are a software business on a subscription basis, meaning that there's an account required in order to use the platform to create the training scenarios, but also to make sure that employees can play it. That starts at €200 a month, which is enough to let 200 people actually play those training scenarios. And we work there with two kind of variables. One would be active players. So you're only being billed actually for people who are actually playing those training. So no matter if you register 10,000 people, only the people who are actually playing, those are be considered as active players. And the other portion would be published scenarios. So the amount of scenarios you actually have published. So there again, you can create thousands of draft scenarios, but only the published ones are the ones you need to pay for. So that's a portion. The other one would be if we help, and as you mentioned already, Robin, we've got a Warp expert community. So these are also companies who know our software and who can help as well. Sometimes we do it as well, helping on creating these training scenarios completely from beginning to end. So that's a portion of structural design, but also a portion kind of media production and post-production and stitching of the videos, etc. That would start somewhere at €10,000 per scenario. That's kind of roughly what you need to think of.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Is that clear, Trudy? Yeah. Okay, great. And Robert also he switched on his video. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
And you have a question as well.
Yeah, I have a question kind of in a completely different direction. I'm a theatrical scenographer. I do stage design primarily. Could there be a theater application here whereby actors are recording themselves, and it's sort of like an immersive or site-specific work where a patron would buy a ticket to an experience of sorts that is maybe room by room and video by video and on demand, essentially. Is that something out of left field that could be a sort of a different application?
Well, there's definitely I think a lot of overlap here. So kind of the kind of the way we approach, you know, this technology is really in the field of learning and training. Still, these are VR experiences which guide people, give people experiences through storytelling, you know, eventually through interactive storytelling. So that's kind of the way they learn. And I think what you're describing is, so I could see this two ways, you know, somehow. I'm not sure if it's kind of the best fit for our platform, but I can see two ways. So one being an experience for kind of consumers eventually, you know, where there is kind of an interactive theatrical, how would you say it, like a kind of interactive theater performance where people can go through, so they could feel more part of that performance otherwise if they would just kind of watch it. I could see that, and it could definitely be different rooms. Maybe you could even decide how people in that performance are gonna react and what they're gonna do. So you can have really, you're more of the director eventually, maybe of that piece. On the other hand, it could also be kind of a learning experience for actors themselves. I could see that as well. So being just a piece of a performance which they can practice in VR. So they just put on the VR headset and they practice with another actor who is actually being filmed maybe. And maybe the recording or voice is very interesting there as well.
Thank you.
The scenario you described was you capture a theater show from different perspectives, and you can change, and the viewer can change from perspective.
Not necessarily perspectives, but right now there's a show called Sleep No More. There were shows everywhere, but there aren't anymore. But it was a sort of immersive piece where a patron comes into a space. There's maybe one other actor, a scene is played, and that patron goes to the next space. So it's kind of a different way. I keep finding since COVID happened, I need to start looking at space in ways I hadn't thought of it before. Virtual space like this. Is there a way, you keep using the word storytelling. Essentially, that's all we're trying to do in theater is tell a story. So I find that really, really interesting kind of a way to think about theater in a VR world. Yeah,
and many VR makers say that they're heavily influenced by theater because of their history of playing with sound, playing with space, and playing with the attention of the audience in a way in a fashion that's way different from film. So it might also be an interesting way to distribute theatrical art pieces at another scale, which also has in a COVID-friendly way as well. Yeah, and we also had students a few years ago already. They also experimented with interactive 360 video, then still in Unity, and it was way more technical exercitation. But they really experimented with how you can do interaction without even knowing it. So previously we saw where you clearly make a choice and then a different video starts, but they were experimenting, okay, what if I just alter the story depending on somebody's gaze and without even knowing it? It was also more interesting, more artistic.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you would like to share, Thijs? I think we're sort of done, right?
Yeah, there's maybe one thing which is interesting to share. Actually, since the beginning, we started with this business. We were always thinking that the different scenarios that are being made currently are really kind of custom for the different organizations, like really business-specific procedures, so to say.
Right.
But definitely in soft skills, for instance, which I think is a good example. There could be training scenarios which are very applicable to multiple businesses. So what we've actually done, and this is definitely fueled by the whole COVID situation, so it kind of speed up things a little bit, is that we're actually developing our technology at the moment to be able to kind of sell training courses that have been created by company A, which can be sold to company B, C, etc. Since it's interesting content. Really good storytelling, high quality scenarios, really making use of the best use of VR and 360 video in such a way that also definitely during COVID, it's more easily to transfer kind of the knowledge you have, for instance, as a training provider, but you've always been bound by, let's say, time and place. So if you would do as a training agency, you would do kind of physical training. You had to drive to a company and to perform that training. Right now, you can actually put that knowledge into very good VR training scenarios and kind of have, let's say the world as a market. So we're really looking into that as well. And we think that's very interesting to kind of give that stage, to people who have that knowledge and can transfer that into really good VR training scenarios to be able to to get them to, you know, different companies and to be able to enjoy those VR learning experiences.
So would that be a bit like now we can go to an e-learning library and buy a selection of generic type courses on leadership or communication or difficult situations? So you would be moving towards something like that with the existing content that you've got?
Definitely. So it's not with the existing content, because all the existing content is really, you know, custom created. But we are looking for partners at the moment in order to create more generic content, indeed, to fill this library.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great new, interesting new direction. Really curious where that will end, and whether perhaps we'll have a part in it in the future. One last question, because we have a lot of audience from more traditional education. Do you still have the discount for schools?
Definitely,
yeah.
50% for 50%. Educational institutions.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so let's wrap up things. So we're planning on an extra session. We're planning for everybody, for all the hub members who, all the pro hub members who want to continue who want to experiment with using VR, with using WarpVR, and actually get started with their first project. We're developing some learning materials, some tutorials, or perhaps we'll do an extra webinar on that. But we're planning on providing resources to get you started there. And yeah, I really want to thank Thijs a lot, and thank you for taking the time, and hope to see you soon. And to everybody else, I hope we'll meet again, and yeah, we'll keep you posted on future sessions. Really nice seeing everybody, and have a good night, day, morning, or whatever it is in your part of the world. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.